God, I thank you for another week to be able to get together, to have fun together, to talk about what we're going to do this summer, to compare arm lengths. And God, I ask that you would focus our hearts and our minds on your word, that you would show us who you are and the good design that you have through us, for us through your word, Lord. So we give you this time. In your name I pray. Amen. Cool. So, as you guys know, we've been in this series called The Design of Love, right? So in this series, we're talking about what God's design is for things like love and marriage and sex, and it has been a long series of a lot of good stuff, right? And so, as a reminder of where we've been so far, we have basically been talking about God's good design, right? You guys remember in Genesis, God called all of us, when he created humanity, it took creation from what? From dust, from good to what? Very good, there we go, now we're remembering. And so we started there, and we moved then to talking about how God's design for us is to reflect him, right? To be his partner on earth. To do that in community and relationship with other people, and to ultimately submit to his design for our lives and not our own. So then we went from there to talking about how God has designed us to serve other people. We started redefining love, right? What is love? We started to redefine that. Yeah, there you go. So Nick talked about last week redefining what love and sex actually means. And we talked about it more in the sense of how it is a gift from God, that it's ultimately supposed to help us show other people God's love through our actions, right? That it is not inherently something that is selfish, it is inherently selfless. So that's quick recap of where we've been. You guys remember this slide from the very first week, right? God's design is what? Good. And then sin screwed up that design. Which is bad, thank you. And God's got a plan that plan brings life. So, hey, well done. You guys are tracking. All right, so the majority of this series, we've been talking about how God's design is good. We've been kind of living in what God's design has been. This week, we get to go a little bit deeper into this orange boy right here. That sin screwed up that design. So tonight is going to be maybe a little bit heavier. Maybe your small groups are going to get a little bit more into a discussion of things that might seem weird or gross, but I think they are important to talk about because we all still live in that world that sin screwed up, right? And so if we are trying to figure out what is God's design for our lives, then we should definitely pay attention to how sin screws up our perception of God's design, right? So, if you're going to only remember one thing from me tonight and forget everything else, which I hope you don't, but if you do, this is what I want you to remember. That when sin distorts God's design for love, marriage, and sex, we devalue people, right? When sin distorts God's design for love, marriage, and sex, we devalue people. So we're going to study that, and then we're going to take a look at some of the verses that talk about God's response to that twisting. We're going to find out that God takes this very, very seriously. So, when sin distorts God's design for love, marriage, and sex, we devalue people, and God takes this very seriously. If we were to open up the Bible and start studying all of what the Bible has to say about this topic, we would be here for days and days and days, which I would love, your leaders would love, but we would need to sleep and eat in that process. So parents might love it, yeah. So what we're going to do tonight is look at a few verses that incorporate this word, porneia, right? This looks maybe a little bit familiar. It is the Greek word that we get the English word pornography from. And this term is kind of like a catch-all term for a lot of things back in the day that described how sin twisted God's design for sex. But for us tonight, I want us to define porneia as any sexual activity outside God's design that twists God's good gift of sex into a selfish act that steals someone's God-given value. So for us tonight, porneia is any sexual activity outside of God's design that twists God's good gift of sex into a selfish act that steals someone else's God-given value. Now, caveat, when I say that it steals someone's God-given value, I want to be clear that that doesn't mean that God doesn't love you, right? To be clear, what I mean by this is that when somebody commits an act that is porneia, it makes it harder for them to see you as good, as a child of God, and sometimes, and oftentimes, it actually makes it hard for yourself to see yourself as good and imago Dei. But I want to be clear that God loves you and sees you the same no matter what you've done or has done to you. God does not change how he loves and sees you based on your actions or anyone else's actions, right? That is the beauty of the cross in his love. So I want to be clear about that from the start. So let's dig into a few verses. Can I get a reading volunteer? Wow, Apple Juice was right on it.
1 Corinthians. Instead, you yourselves cheat and do wrong, and you do this to your own brothers and sisters. Or do you not know that your wrongdoers will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor the I don't know how to pronounce that. Idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who have sex with men, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor the drunkards, nor the slanderers, nor the swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God.
Nice, thank you. So what we just read, and what we'll talk about here in a second, is a list, right? It's a list of descriptors from our boy Paul that describe the type of people that are walking farther and farther away from the kingdom of God. Now, what you should know about Paul, and we'll talk about him a lot more next year, is that he likes his lists, right? If you read letters that he writes to his church friends, you'll notice like entire paragraphs of scripture where he makes like a list of really good things, and then immediately before or after, he makes a list of really bad things. And he does this often to illustrate the big difference between a life spent pursuing God and the things that come out of that, and a life spent walking away from God and what that type of life is like. So, what I want us to see in this list is that our phrase porneia, which I kind of highlighted here, sexually immoral, is surrounded by things and descriptors in this list that we know hurt people. So, for example, instead you yourselves cheat. Let's start with that. Raise your hand. How does cheating hurt somebody? Just like off the top of your head, how does cheating hurt somebody?
In Monopoly, when you start stealing hundreds from the bank, then your friend doesn't want to play Monopoly with you anymore.
Okay, yeah, so you start to hurt trust, right? Anyone else?
Wait, so it's like anything, like, no.
Oh.
So, like, it, like, hurts because...
So cheating makes it feel like they don't value you, right? Go for it.
Yeah, kind of like what Jordan says, is it kind of like brings down, it makes you feel like you're not, like you're the one that should change because like they don't like you anymore, or like they value that person more than they value you, when you should value yourself even more than what they should do.
Yeah, so they're violating, when somebody cheats, especially in the relationship that you're talking about, right? Like, you start to understand, like we inherently understand that devalues somebody, right? Keep reading. So it says, instead, you yourselves cheat and do wrong, and you do this to your brothers and sisters. Think about that. Paul's saying you are cheating and doing wrong to the people that you call family, right? That should hit you a little deeper. And then he keeps going, or do you not know the wrongdoers will not inherit the kingdom of God? So do not be deceived, neither sexually immoral, nor idolaters. So think about idolaters for a second. That's not a word we use a lot. Can anyone think of an example of an idol in our life? Let's see. I saw Mr. Matt Key's hand first.
Idolatry we might have is maybe screens.
Screens? Yeah. So screens can be something. Do you want to actually talk about why screens can be an idol? Sure.
You can look and do it more than reading the Bible and studying God's word and praying to Him.
Yeah, exactly. There is a lot of great examples. So we could spend all night talking about that. But there's a lot of idols in our lives that we're familiar with that essentially take our attention and our devotion away from God and onto other things that aren't going to fulfill us in the same way, right? And God, actually, Scripture says that God is a jealous God. So He gets jealous, rightfully, when we spend time with, and attention on other things that don't fill us up like He can, right? So idolaters, when you are worshiping something that is an idol, you're not just hurting yourself, right? Friends see what you're doing, and they might be influenced by you. So an idolater can hurt themselves, but they can also mislead other people, right? So idolaters can hurt people, right? Adulterers. Does anyone want to tell us how an adulterer or an adultery situation can hurt people or devalue people? You guys have talked already? Anyone? You have a thought?
Yeah, but I don't want the mic.
You can say it. I'll repeat it. Yeah. 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 And the thing with adultery, too, that's highlighted because of the word adultery there, is that it's cheating in the context of a marriage relationship, right? Marriage being, we use this word a little bit when we're talking about the Old Testament. It's a covenant, right? It's this divine agreement that when you break it, really devalues the other person, right? And it hurts them. So we get that. I got to keep going because there's a lot more, but I see those hands, so you should talk about it in a small group. So it says adulterers, nor men who have sex with men. So quick note on that. In the Roman Empire, when this was being written, the culture that was around it, sex was used as something that was not the point of sex in that world was not to show love to somebody else. It was not necessarily to show them God's love in a covenantal marriage relationship. It was actually something that was used more to gain power and influence in the culture. So even that immediate switching, sex became something that devalues people so that you can get more status or power, right? It was a game of power and politics. So when Paul was talking about this, men who have sex with men, he was also talking about how sex in that time was used to kind of step on people, right? Just think about that for a second. That is so far removed from what we have seen God's good design for sex and marriage and love, right? So Paul is speaking directly into that. And then he keeps going and he says, nor thieves, nor the greedy. So if we stop there, right, we can all think of examples of how greedy people or burglars or thieves, how they hurt people, right? They devalue somebody's things, somebody's security, somebody's sense of ownership, right? And so all of these people, there's more slanderers, swindlers, all of these people are not going to be inheriting the kingdom of God. I'd add with the caveat there of if they don't come and repent to Jesus, right? So what I want to point out here is that Paul puts our key phrase, porneia, in the context of a list where we already understand how people get hurt and devalue people, right? So can I get another reader? Let's see. Let's go Hazel. She popped in when we were talking. It's all good.
Okay. Galatians 5:19 to 21. The acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions of envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God.
Yeah, thank you. So just look at that list for a second. We're not going to take as much time with it. But look at some of those words, right? We've already talked about idolatry. Witchcraft is a new one. Hatred. Think about how anger can hurt people. Fits of rage. Yep. Envy, drunkenness. There's just like, this is another example of Paul putting our phrase sexual immorality, porneia, in a context where everything else in the list, like we already have a sense of how it hurts people, right? So if you can't tell by now, Paul's pretty serious about getting to the point that sexual immorality, anything outside of God's design for sex, hurts people, right? It devalues people. And it's twisting God's original design of sex and of love and marriage that's supposed to be selfless and giving to another person and actually reflective of God's love for us. Let's do one more. Can I get a reader? We'll talk about it in small group. Oh, you want to read it? Witchcraft. That is a great question. That is like a whole nother series. But witchcraft, essentially, in this sense, back in that day, there was a lot of different religious groups that worshipped like spirits and other beings. Some people might like denote that to like basically demonic activity, right? And so witchcraft in this sense, actually in the Old Testament too, is dealing with any spiritual forces that don't actually connect you with God, right? That you are trying to, in some ways, gain power outside of a relationship with God, and in some ways, maybe even trying to become God in different ways. And so witchcraft in this context was something more like that. It wasn't necessarily like Harry Potter or something like that. It was more about engaging with real spiritual beings that have rebelled against God and are offering things to humans that are tempting. Kind of like shameful lust. So, can we get a reader for this? Ooh. Let's go, Mr. Mason.
Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lust. Even their women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men and received in themselves due to the penalty for their error.
Yeah. So Paul is actually referring to an Old Testament story here that we don't have time to fully dig into. But what I want us to see here is what I've highlighted. In this verse, we don't actually see the Greek word porneia. We get a slightly different iteration, but it says shameful lusts, shameful acts. Where else in our series have we explicitly talked about shame? Yeah, exactly. We talked about shame as an exact and like immediate effect of sin's entry into the world, right? So we see it come up here again. And do you guys remember what, like pre-fall, Adam and Eve were in the garden and they were naked, right? Essentially, well, but you're not wrong, because part of what is meant by this is that they didn't feel shame, right? They were naked and they felt no shame. And so what I want to point out here is when we start to see a twisting of God's design for sex, it is automatically associated with shame and lust, which is like a direct opposite picture of what we see in the Garden of Eden before the fall, right? It actually in some ways mirrors immediately what happens after the fall. So Paul, and there's like a handful of other verses like this that I want us to take a look at. But I want us to really remember and see that when we use this word porneia, especially in the New Testament with Paul, it's always put in lists, it's almost always put in lists of things that we know hurt and devalue other people. And so God hates this. I just want to say that again. God hates anything that we do. He doesn't hate us necessarily. He hates when we do things that devalue ourselves and other people. Because remember, God was the one who called us very good. And so sin, and especially in the context of sex, love, and marriage, can be so harmful and destructive, right? Because we wrap so much of our emotion and our being into love and what other people think about us, into marriage covenants, and even in sex, that when sin starts to twist it, it's more than just doing something bad, guys. This stuff is not, like, God doesn't get mad at us for just, like, not following a rule. Right? That's not the kind of God that we have. He gets frustrated and hurt by this because it's hurting his good creation that we don't have the rights to call not good. So I want to leave that there. What is his response? Because God takes this seriously. What is his response? So I want to look at a few verses that talk about what we are supposed to do in response to porneia. So I need another reading volunteer. Let's go. Let's do Silas.
Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies.
Yeah, thank you. So you guys might recognize the end of that verse, because we talked about it when we were talking about how we are called to actually submit to God. But here's the more full context of that, right? So what is the immediate call for us? How are we supposed to respond against porneia? Yeah, go for it. Flee. Yeah, flee, right? It's the first word. Flee from it. Flee, right? It's not talking about the, it's simple, it's right there. This is not the flea that like attaches to your dog or cat, right? This is the flea that you got to turn around and run the other way, right? Like, yeah, it's 2 E's, right? It's like when like if you are held up in a castle, right? And there's like an army coming against you, and you're like, the military person's like, hey, you got to flee out of here, right? It's like you got to run as fast as you can in the opposite direction, away from the attacking army, because they are going to hurt you. That is like the extremity that he's trying to get us to see here. That like when there are instances of sexual immorality, when there is temptation to engage in any sexual act outside of God's good design, flee from it, run the other way, right? Remember when we talked about submitting to God, how fleeing from the devil actually brings you closer to God, which is a pretty cool thing. It's a pretty good place to be, right? So flee from sexual immorality. And then the other imperative here is you are not your own, you were bought with the price, therefore honor God with your bodies. Think about this. Look at your body right now. Just like take a good gander, right? We've all got it. Do you guys know that God like intentionally gave you that body? I know. It's kind of mind-boggling to think about. He gave you that body with the intention that you would use it in this world to love him and to love other people with it. And so what you do with your body, both in like general and in sexual nature, if you call yourself a Christian especially, needs to honor God with what you do with it, right? So what do you get from 1 Corinthians? Flee from it and then honor God with your bodies. Let's go to this one and get another reader, por favor. Let's go over here. I actually saw your hand last time. Can you see it?
Uh-huh.
Nice eyesight.
Sure. It is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality, that each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honorable, not in
passionate?
Oh, passionate, just like the pagans who do not know God, and that in this matter no one should wrong or take advantage of a brother or sister. The Lord will punish all those who commit such things, as we told you and warned you before, for God did not call us to be impure, but to live a holy life.
Nice, well done. Yeah, so again, we see Paul get right to the point. It's God's will, if you're ever wondering what God's will is, that you should be sanctified. Anyone know what that means? Take a guess. What does it mean to be sanctified? Let's go to Darius. Darius, what do you think sanctified means? What does it mean to be sanctified?
It means to clean your body like a sanctuary and only do holy things.
Oh, come on now. Yeah. So sanctified, sanctified is just a churchy word to basically mean, as we walk with God more, we become more like him, right? And so it's God's will that as we walk in that relationship with God more, we become more like him. Part of what that means is that we avoid sexual immorality, that each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honorable. Sounds pretty familiar, right? Friends? Thank you. That is honoring the body, that you guys are doing that and making a joyful noise to the Lord, but maybe at another time. Not in passionate lust like the pagans do. Think about that for a second. Pagans basically mean in this context, somebody who is not pursuing God. So there is a path, there's a direct way in which you can allow your lusts, your desires of the flesh, your sexual desires that are not leading you to engage in sex in the godly way. You can follow those. You can do whatever you want in that sense. And you are going to be more like the people who don't follow God, who don't want to follow God, than you are going to be like the person who has a desire to walk with God. Now, that is not to say that if you mess up, again, I said at the beginning, it's not to say that if you mess up, that God won't love you, because he will. It's not to say that you can't ask for forgiveness and get redeemed, right? But it's to say that you're going to have choices in life to make about the types of influences and desires that you're going to choose to engage with and those that you're going to choose to not engage with, right? And God has a lot to say about what we're supposed to do when those opportunities arise. Yes?
How is God jealous when the devil made jealousy?
That's a fantastic question that you should talk about in small groups, because we got to keep going. But genuinely, that is a great question. So what I wanted to point out here also is that Paul's warning us, don't follow those passionate lusts or take advantage of a brother or sister. Taking advantage of a brother or sister. Right? We talked about this a little bit earlier in the first verse that we read. But it is possible to violate somebody else's sense of goodness that God has given them by taking advantage of them. Right? That can be in the sexual sense. That can be in a relational sense. No matter what sense it's in, God is not down for that. Right? I hope it's been clear by this point in the series that God has given us so much value, not based on what we can do, but based on his love and the fact that he created us, right? So God's response to porneia is a lot of things. And these things come from different verses that we didn't read. But we're supposed to flee from it. We're supposed to honor God with our bodies. So to follow God's example, to walk in the way of love, to be sanctified, just process. Straight up, just supposed to avoid it. You're supposed to learn to control your bodies and set your heart on things of God. And there's actually this verse that we didn't read, but it actually says, put to death the acts of the flesh. So Paul goes as far as say, picture, this is going to get a little graphic, but I think it's worth it. Picture this, being that is just pure dark and evil, right? That being consists of every evil desire that you have, every temptation that arises that you know is not godly, but part of you kind of wants to do it, right? Paul says, imagine all of that. He calls it the acts of the flesh. He wants you to kill it, to crucify it. Yeah, sounds aggressive, but Paul and God, through Paul's words, gets really to the point that this stuff, if you don't take it to God, if you don't do anything with it, is going to destroy you. It's going to take you away from God, and that is not a good place to be, right? So God takes this seriously. Again, when sin distorts God's design for love, marriage, and sex, we devalue people, and God takes this very seriously. So I think we should take it really seriously, right? So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to pray. We're going to go to small groups. But in small groups, I want you guys to ask those questions, like the jealousy question. I want you to ask questions that are on your brain about all of this, because this can be really complicated stuff, and it's serious stuff, right? So take advantage of being with each other, of having your awesome leaders there, and then a reminder to write down questions that you want to talk about in our panel a few weeks from now. So I'm going to pray, and then we go to small groups. So eyes closed, nothing in your hands. All right, 1 second. We're going to talk to God, and I hope that's more important to you than getting to a room quickly. Thank you. Father, thank you for showing us your heart through these words, that you value us and love us, that you take it seriously when we and other people twist what you've had planned for us in love, marriage, and sex. God, would you bless our conversations? Would you give us the freedom to ask what we're thinking? Would you give us opportunities to see even more truth in your word and how you're responding to all of this stuff that can take us away from you, Lord. So God, we give the rest of the night to you. We love you. In your name I pray. Amen. 750, friends. 750 back.
So the second verse we read, it said discord. What does that mean?
Discord. So it basically means, yes, I was going to say that's probably what you're thinking of, right? Discord is basically just another word for like just